5 murders, so gruesome, even police were shocked.
Hit with hammers, cut up in pieces with a sawzall.
They cut my cousin's tattoo off and fed it to their dogs.
Everybody kind of felt sick.
It was the work of a cult of 3, out to defeat Satan and heal the world. What turned this latter-day saint into a modern-day Charles Manson? Best-selling crime writer Aphrodite Jones gets the exclusive inside story. What is it like to live with a budding psychopath? For the first time, Playboy centerfold Carrie Furman breaks her silence.
I was actually scared to leave him. I thought my only way out was to kill myself.
During the summer of 2000, in Northern California, a self-described prophet of God and his 2 cult followers committed a string of grisly murders. Retirees Ivan and Annette Steinman were kidnapped, beaten to death, chopped into pieces, and dumped in the Sacramento River Delta. Selena Bishop, 22-year-old daughter of blues legend Elvin Bishop, had her skull crushed and throat slit. And Selena's mother, Jennifer Villerin, and Jennifer's boyfriend, Jim Gamble, were riddled with gunfire while they slept. An intense investigation led police to 3 suspects: Glenn Taylor Helzer, 30, his 28-year-old brother, Justin Helzer, and Dawn Godman, 26. On August 7, 2000, the trio would be charged with 5 ghastly murders. Crime author Aphrodite Jones heads east from San Francisco into Contra Costa County, one of America's most beautiful places, to investigate one of the country's ugliest crimes.
It's a devastating story about people who find a prophet, a false prophet, and want so desperately for somebody to believe in, to bring them to God, not understanding that they can have that power in themselves.
Taylor and Justin Helzer were raised as strict Mormons and had called California home for years. Dawn Godman was a Northern California native and a recent convert to the Mormon Church. On the surface, they seemed the most unlikely of killers.
Here's a person who was a good Mormon by most accounts. So what turns someone like Glenn Taylor Helzer suddenly into a murderous zealot? And how did he convince his brother, Justin, and Dawn Godman to kill at his behest?
Detective Steve Shabati worked the case.
The community was shocked at the nature of this crime. I mean, this was something that goes beyond all boundaries. There was no reason for these victims to be victims.
The physical evidence was dramatic. Fingerprints, blood type, and DNA test matches. The hammer used to crush Selena's skull. The 9mm Beretta used to murder Jennifer Villerin and Jim Gamble. The power saw used to cut up the bodies. And the driver's licenses, wallets, and personal jewelry of their victims. The police knew a lot. They knew who, they knew when, and they knew how. What they didn't know was why. Taylor refused to talk about the crimes.
He never gave a statement. He never talked to the police. He never talked to me or any of the other lead investigators that said that he did it and why he did it.
The other suspects, Justin Helzer and Dawn Godman, weren't talking either, and Dawn's attorneys wanted to know why. Aphrodite spoke with Dave Sullivan, a cult deprogrammer brought in by Dawn's defense team to investigate.
When I got into the case, I was brought in specifically because the attorneys representing Dawn Godman could not get her to cooperate in her own defense. She showed an unswerving loyalty to Taylor as a prophet.
Dawn's only chance of escaping the death penalty was to testify against Taylor and Justin.
She believed that the whole criminal process really had no meaning for her because Taylor had promised them that it would all work out.
They were facing life in prison and possibly the death penalty. I mean, how much of a true believer do you have to be to think that Taylor Helzer is just going to make it all go away?
It took Sullivan months to deprogram Dawn Godman. But once in court, she told the whole stomach-churning story in graphic detail. This was more than a series of senseless murders. It was carnage, all in the name of God. Taylor, Justin, and Heather Helzer grew up in Northern California. Raised by devout Mormon parents, they were a close-knit family where visions were taken seriously. Their grandfather preached scripture nightly, and he claimed to have once been visited by Jesus in the flesh. Taylor was close to his grandfather and delved deep into the Book of Mormon at an early age.
When he was a kid, he would share his religious zeal with everybody. He did it in a way that was very friendly and harmless. And people liked him, even if they didn't like his religious view.
Taylor's mother, Karma Helzer, had always felt there was something special about her oldest child. Author Claire Booth was a reporter for the Contra Costa Times.
His mother really truly believed that he was a prophet of God. And so she always treated him that way.
Karma Helzer taught her other children to defer to Taylor.
She would repeat a biblical tale about two brothers and how one brother had to be totally loyal to the older brother, devoted to the older brother.
Justin grew up Taylor's best friend and his biggest admirer.
So Justin, there's no exaggeration, he lived in Taylor's shadow and felt he could never say no to him.
At age 14, Taylor started hearing voices. Revelations from beyond, he was sure. And in his home, that was seen as a blessing, divine evidence that Taylor was special.
I think people got sucked into it. They were attracted to it. They felt that he could provide them answers.
Taylor's gift made him the spiritual head of the family.
Taylor was the leader of that family, not the father, not the mother. They followed him because they seemed to regard him as a spiritual leader.
After high school and a tour in the National Guard, he set off to do missionary work.
In the Mormon Church, when young men turn 19, they are sent on a 2-year mission. And in Taylor's case, they decided, as the young rising star that he was, he would be sent all the way to Brazil.
He was assigned to an area north of Brazil's stunning capital city, Brasilia. He walked into communities full of poverty, orphans, crime, and prostitution. And people loved him.
And he did phenomenally. He was outgoing, and he did outreach, and he did conversions, and was just, wonderful missionary.
And he had never been idolized like that, except for perhaps his mother. And he kind of set records for converting people to LDS, Mormonism. He was a star.
The worst thing in the world is to go to a place where you're the biggest fish in a small pond, and that's what happened when Taylor Helzer went to Brazil. He was idolized, he was practically worshipped.
By Dave Sullivan's reckoning, it went to Taylor's head.
My theory is that really ignited that fire in him for this huge belief that he was special, really special.
Then, midway through his 2-year tour, Taylor's views on Scripture began to grow extreme. He felt the second coming was just around the corner, and no one was paying attention but him.
He felt like he could communicate directly with God. So he didn't need any mediator. So he started to argue with the bishop.
By the end of his time in Brazil, Taylor's spiritual focus had shifted from the glories of the gospel to the perils of moral decay and the coming apocalypse. By the time he left Brazil, Taylor Helzer was convinced he had more divine authority than anyone in the church, and that he alone should lead the world's 9 million Mormons. Back home in California, his mother was waiting. Karma Helzer wanted Taylor to experience a self-awareness workshop that had made her feel wonderful. But she had no idea of the profound effect it would have on her son. Taylor arrived home on November 20th, 1991. The next day, he began Harmony Impact training.
It's okay to live life. It's okay to be anything or do anything you want to do.
A deeper level of awareness of who I truly am.
It just shines. It has to shine.
Aphrodite Jones spoke with cult deprogrammer Dave Sullivan about Harmony Impact training.
What is Harmony training?
It's kind of a self-empowerment training. So you go there and ideally you overcome all your old fixed beliefs, your limitations, your negative feelings about yourself.
One of the principles was the notion that there's no right and there's no wrong. What does that mean?
The secret to understanding there is no right or no wrong is to understand that there's only results. And this is the big revelation that he delivered.
If all there is results and there's no right and no wrong, then I should be able to do whatever I need to do by any means necessary.
Exactly. Believe that very strongly.
Dr. Robert Dolgoff testified at Justin Helzer's trial.
He said actually that right and wrong can be judged later by its fruit. Does it bear good fruit? He said. And I read that a few places too in some of the documents. And that's the only way you can judge whether something was right or wrong. So if you look at his logic about it, if carrying out what he thought was the will of God could bring about the new millennium and the defeat of Satan, then it would have had good fruit, and it would be, in retrospect, judged to be right.
Taylor loved what Harmony Impact training taught him, and he shared it with everyone he could.
I see people that go through it who have a wonderful result. I personally have had good results from that kind of self-awareness.
Sure.
But I also see people who take it 10 steps too far.
I would say that Taylor is absolutely one of those people. There's a mantra that they have in impact training. There's no right or wrong. And Taylor took that and he applied that to the entire context of his reality in real life.
Then, in the spring of 1993, Taylor married.
He came home from his mission and he did what good Mormons were supposed to do, and he got married and he had kids.
His father-in-law helped him get a job as a financial advisor, but Taylor soon felt the work was too ordinary for him.
And all of a sudden he looked around and this was boring. It did not satisfy him.
Taylor didn't want to be married or manage retirement portfolios. He wanted to transform the world, and he liked to talk about it.
I think he took it for granted that people would listen to his ideas and just accept them because he was a persuasive person. And the change that I noticed was that he became irritable if people did not fall in line and accept the things that he was trying to teach them.
His wife pleaded with him to get therapy, but after a few sessions, he went back to awareness training instead.
He still had all of his characteristics. He was still outgoing and still charming and still all of those things. But he was gradually learning how to really use those skills. To manipulate people and get them to do what he wanted.
In the summer of 1996, Taylor left his wife and kids and moved in with his brother. He immediately began using drugs and having sex outside of his marriage.
He had begun doing things that, he'd always preached against. I was taken back.
Worried, his sister Heather wrote to the church, and Taylor was excommunicated. He didn't care. By the spring of 1998, his prophetic visions had reached far beyond the material world. Taylor felt that he'd found his life's purpose.
He began to say that he thought he was the one who had been chosen to usher in the second coming of Jesus Christ. Not as the Bible prophesied, the second coming, but through his own way of bringing peace and love to the world.
But it would take money to change the world. So Taylor decided to start an escort service to generate capital. At a local restaurant, he met a fresh-faced 21-year-old blonde just coming out of an abusive relationship. He thought Carrie Furman could be his number one. For the first time, the Playboy centerfold breaks her silence to reveal to Aphrodite Jones what it was like living with Taylor Helzer.
What kind of guy was he? What did he strike you as? What kind of guy was Taylor when you first met him?
He seemed like he had a good job, dressed in a suit, and was well-mannered, and just looked like he just had a good thing going for himself, like he had a career.
He actually did have a career. He worked at Dean Witter, and he had 150 clients, right?
Yes.
So when you met him, he was a stockbroker.
Yes.
So you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is a catch.
Yeah.
For a while, the two seemed to complement each other.
He wanted to get to know who I was before being intimate with me, and that was kind of different. Then when we did sleep together, he actually cried, like telling me that I was, helping him. I was helping him break through all of his issues. So I actually felt sorry for him that he was getting out of his church.
For Carrie, Taylor was a ray of hope in a difficult life.
His words, his unconditional love, his intimacy into me, you see, eye contact, lots of hugs. I didn't grow up in like a loving home where we hugged each other. My mom left when I was 1. You know what I mean? Like, I've always felt abandoned, and he knew that.
Taylor took Carrie to all-night raves, where she loved to dance. And they both took a lot of drugs, especially ecstasy.
So we were just having a lot of fun experiencing San Francisco. It was just kind of like young life.
But Taylor's plan for Carrie included Harmony Impact training.
He basically made me go. We were actually going there to drop take somebody else there, and I didn't know he had already packed a bag for me and paid for me to go. So as we were saying goodbye to a friend, I was actually pushed in myself to go.
Oh, so he pushed you into it?
Basically.
In the spring of 1998, Taylor Helzer was still 2 years away from launching a 5-day killing spree that would leave a trail of dismembered bodies and bullet-riddled corpses across 2 California counties. But back then, when he first met Carrie Furman, Taylor Helzer needed cash. And he saw Carrie as a way to jumpstart his idea for a high-end escort service. Carrie tells Aphrodite Jones what it was like living with a budding psychopath who thought he had a special relationship with God.
Did you feel you were brainwashed by Taylor?
Yeah.
So he was very good at cajoling people, at getting you to do what he wanted you to do.
A lot of people to do it, have a lot of people do it. He wanted them to do.
How did he do that?
I think going through that program really, because I was like basically stripped down of all my beliefs and all my walls.
She was an easy target for the calculating Taylor.
When he just like goes in there and just, okay, this is how you're supposed to be, or this is what I want you to do. And I just, okay.
Taylor also pressured Carrie to get breast implants.
How did he approach that with you?
I don't know how it just came about, but next thing I know, I'm in a consultation room with a doctor talking about it.
But while Taylor was grooming Carrie to be his star escort, he needed other sources of income. Taylor convinced Carrie to help him fake a mental breakdown so he could stop working and collect disability insurance payments.
I was like calling his doctor and saying, you know, something's different about him. Like I was basically the one setting up the foundation for him to snap and do his thing of acting like he was insane.
Taylor put peanut butter in his hair and mixed drugs and alcohol before his psychological evaluation sessions. It worked.
Well, with the money that he would get from his disability, we would buy ecstasy in large quantities and sell it. That created money.
They started using harder drugs, including cocaine and crystal meth.
The drugs were really starting to mess with him, and he started contemplating all these different schemes in his head and ways to make money. And that's when sending my pictures of Playboy came in there, thinking maybe I was his ticket to meeting powerful people.
Carrie got the breast implants and took a second job as a stripper to pay for the surgery.
I actually hated the job. I didn't want to be there anymore because I had gotten the job for a specific reason, and when I had met it, I was done with it. But Taylor had, you know, other ideas.
Taylor's escort service idea was evolving. He wanted Carrie's help recruiting strippers at the club.
And he was going to create this sex orgy scenario with very sophisticated women.
Yes, and very rich men that paid a lot of money.
So he continued to try to create that by approaching different dancers, different women.
And he thought by having me in that industry would make the other women feel comfortable.
Taylor decided Carrie was ready to apply to Playboy, so they arranged a photo shoot in their driveway. By now, Carrie wanted out of the relationship, but she felt powerless.
I was actually scared to leave him. I didn't know what would happen if I left. And I thought my only way out was kill myself. So I basically was just doing as many drugs as I could to kill myself. And he actually saw that. He saw what I was doing. I think he came home one day and I was just like basically on my last leg laying in bed, just skinny, just not eating. And he told me to go home.
It was an opportunity she couldn't afford to pass up. It was late winter 2000.
Literally, when he told me that, I packed my stuff and I was gone the next day.
That spring, Playboy got in touch, and Carrie moved to Los Angeles. They wanted her to be Miss September.
A centerfold.
A centerfold.
12 girls a year get picked for this. 12.
When he heard about the Playboy deal, Taylor was furious Carrie had gotten away. But he learned from the experience.
So never again did he pick someone who was pretty or had the potential for, you know, self-confidence and the potential to make something of herself and walk out.
Taylor Helzer met Dawn Godman at a murder mystery dinner held at the Mormon Temple in Oakland, California.
The advantage Taylor had by meeting her at that church dinner was that she considered him a good Mormon man. She'd recently been converted to the church, so she had this absolute faith that it was a safe environment for her to meet someone. And in her view, the most handsome, charismatic, striking man in that whole place was Taylor Helzer. And he gave her attention, which she loved.
Dawn Godman was damaged goods, and Taylor knew it.
I mean, if you want to paint a portrait of a woman who is extremely vulnerable, Dawn was it. She was raised an evangelical Christian. She had a crisis of faith, got mixed up in drugs, became suicidal, and then was saved, you know, by someone giving her a Book of Mormon, and joined in the church, found her way.
Dawn moved in with Taylor and Justin Helzer, and soon Taylor took her to a Mormon temple parking lot so he could reveal his true identity. Demian Bulwa was a reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle at the time.
He could tell her because Satan couldn't overhear because the angels surrounded them at this church.
Taylor told Don he was a prophet of God, ordained to save the world.
He held forth about his philosophy and his beliefs, and he seemed a very wise person, and she's a new convert, and Taylor knew Scripture, vast quantities of Scripture memorized, and he could spout it seemingly unceasingly. So she was deeply impressed and sexually attracted to him, and thinking that this could be the ideal guy in her life.
Don bought in, and together with Justin, Taylor had his 2 disciples.
Taylor never went to Don and said, hey, listen, follow me and we're going to murder some innocent people and take all their money. You know, she had no idea. She was led initially by idealism, as was Justin.
I think he truly believed that his brother was working on God's behalf and was specifically and directly designated by God to carry out this endeavor. And he believed it. And that doesn't make any sense. That's psychotic. I mean, murder, killing people, that doesn't make sense. It's not rational. And he believed that his brother really was a prophet of God, and his brother wanted him to help him, and he helped him. And he believed his brother. And he came to believe exactly the same thing that his brother believed.
Taylor called his 2 minions the Children of Thunder, inspired by a biblical story about 2 brothers.
John and James, who asked to sit at the left and the right hand of the Holy Father. Jesus had called John and James the sons of thunder. So now that Taylor thought of himself as being in that position, instead of the sons of thunder, he dubbed them the children of thunder.
On July 26, 2000, Taylor Helzer would turn 30. Jesus Christ had begun to preach at 30. Joseph Smith founded the first Mormon temple at 30. So Taylor Helzer decided the Sunday after his birthday, July 30th, 2000, would be the perfect time for the Children of Thunder to shake the world. By spring 2000, Taylor Helzer had the Children of Thunder, his younger brother Justin and Don Godman, completely under control. They truly believed he was a divinely inspired prophet and were prepared to help him save the world, even if they had to break the law to do it.
Initially, it was all about just liberating people from their own suffering and bringing harmony in the training to everyone, including people that couldn't afford it. And the end result would be peace and harmony throughout the world. What a cause.
Dawn Godman had already made it very clear that she would sacrifice anything for Taylor.
Right after she came out of the harmony training, he persuaded her to give up her child, which meant more than anything to her, her 5-year-old, to move in with Taylor, because Taylor told her she had to move in with he and Justin.
Justin's loyalty, too, was unquestioned.
Do you think that Taylor deliberately held his brother back so that he could have this full-on follower?
I'm certain that Justin didn't grow up all his life thinking that his brother was a prophet, but once they both went through the trainings and Taylor kind of began revealing himself that he was the prophet, Justin did buy it 100%, as did Dawn.
They rented a 3-bedroom house in Concord, California, where Taylor gave everyone tasks. Justin purchased a 9mm Beretta. Dawn was sent to buy ski masks, stun guns, and handcuffs. And Taylor trolled the clubs for an unwitting young woman he could use to launder money.
He picked someone who was young and trusting and who had never had the attention from, you know, a 30-year-old tall, handsome, mysterious guy.
He found her in 22-year-old Selena Bishop, daughter of Jennifer Villarin and blues musician Elvin Bishop. He introduced himself as Jordan Taylor and the romance began.
He didn't tell her anything truthful about himself. He refused to meet any of her friends. He was very elusive.
That summer, Taylor, aka Jordan, asked Selena to open a bank account for him in her name.
The story he gave her was that he had an inheritance coming that he needed to hide from his ex-wife.
Taylor's real plan was extortion and murder. It began on July 30th, 2000, the first Sunday after Taylor Helser's 30th birthday. The trio got up, prayed, and declared war on Satan. That afternoon, Taylor and Justin knocked at the door of Ivan and Annette Steinman, an elderly couple who were friends, as well as former clients of Taylor. The brothers kidnapped the couple and with Dawn's help forced them to write 2 checks totaling $100,000 payable to Selena Bishop. Then they drugged the Steinmans and tried to kill them by banging their heads on the floor. When cracking their skulls didn't work, Taylor finished them off with a knife. Taylor reminded his disciples that theirs was a righteous act, a means to gain funds needed to transform the world into a loving, moral place.
After they had killed the Steinmans, they actually knelt down at their home and thanked them for giving their lives for a higher good.
Taylor and Justin dismembered the bodies with a power saw and stuffed them into duffel bags. But killing the Steinmans before cashing the checks was an error. The next day, a Monday, Taylor compounded his mistake by sending Dawn to the bank in a bizarre outfit.
He thought that the more outrageous Dawn looked, the less people would remember her. So he had her dress in this bright lime green outfit. She had on a cowboy hat and she was in a wheelchair.
The bank branch manager, Vicki Sexton, fixed on the strange woman immediately.
It was a very warm day. She was dressed peculiarly for that day, and it just caught my attention as soon as she entered the door, and I just watched her as she wheeled herself over to my desk.
Dawn deposited the checks into the account Selena had opened at Taylor's request. She asked Vicki to make the money available right away, claiming Selena needed life-saving open-heart surgery.
And with open heart surgery, no health insurance, the Steinman, who were grandparents, were loaning her or giving her the money, the $100,000, so that she could have the surgery. That seemed like a really big story to me.
Vicki made it clear she wouldn't release the money without a personal confirmation from the Steinmans. While Dawn waited, she called and got the answering machine.
Hello, this is the Steinman residence. We are unable to come to the phone right now, but if you will leave your name and number at the sound of the beep.
Dawn wheeled herself out of the bank without the cash. Taylor knew that now they had to cover their tracks, and that meant inviting Selena over for the evening.
Jordan had her lay down on the pretext that he was going to give her a back massage. As she laid down, Justin hit her with a hammer in the back of the head multiple times.
But the hammer wasn't enough.
She was still alive and breathing, holding on.
While Dawn watched, Taylor picked up a knife, yanked Selena's head back, and slit her throat. Selena's corpse was dismembered like the Steinmans. Taylor sliced the tattoo off her shoulder and fed it to their Rottweiler. And he wasn't finished yet.
Taylor was kind of going over things in his head and came to realize that there was still another loose end. He had met Selena's mom. She could identify him.
It was still night. Taylor headed for Selena's apartment, where he knew Jennifer Villerin would be sleeping.
He dressed up like the guy in The Matrix. You know, he had the flowing coat and he had the guns out and he reenacted the scenes.
Surprised to find a man with her in bed, Taylor shot them both to death, then fled with Dawn, who drove the getaway car.
All this in the name of God?
All this in the name of God in their mind.
How evil can you get?
I've said all along, if anybody's ever met the devil, I think I've met the devil in this entire investigation.
The sound of the 7 gunshots just after daybreak quickly brought deputies to the apartment on a quiet street in the town of Woodacre. There hadn't been a murder there in 14 years. It was August 3rd, 2000. Detective Steve Nash was there.
Inside the residence, we found 2 deceased individuals, a female and a male, and a lot of blood and evidence of a shooting within the residence.
The victims were shot while they slept. Police identified them as Jennifer Villerin and her boyfriend, Jim Gamble. Deputies learned the couple had been using the apartment of Jennifer's 22-year-old daughter, Selena Bishop. Investigators wanted to talk to Selena.
They didn't know if it was a case of mistaken identity. They didn't know what was going on, but they couldn't find Selena.
The victim's family struggled to make sense of the situation.
Her and Selena were very tender people. They wouldn't fight back if somebody was aggressive toward them.
I couldn't believe that my aunt was gone, and all of a sudden now that my cousin's missing and nobody knows where she's at, I was numb.
Meanwhile, back in Taylor Helzer's town of Concord, on the very same day, August 3rd, 2000, a woman reported that her elderly parents, Ivan and Annette Steinman, were missing. The daughter stopped by the house to check on her parents, but they weren't there.
Their van was gone, they were gone, but most of their stuff was there still, and things just weren't adding up.
4 days after the shooting in Marin County, the police thought they had finally pieced together the identity of Selena's mysterious boyfriend, Jordan.
It was very difficult because nobody knew anything, which was exactly how Taylor had wanted it. But they talked to so many people, so many of Selena's friends. One person knew that the boyfriend lived with his brother. Someone else had heard that he lived in Concord.
Selena's pager turned up at the restaurant where she waitressed. It held a record of incoming calls.
The phone numbers came back to 2 common people with the same last name in the Concord and Walnut Creek area with the last name of Helzer. We then did a records check with Concord Police Department, identifying Glenn Taylor Helzer and Justin Helzer as living on Saddlewood in Concord.
In the early morning hours of Monday, August 7th, 2000, officers from both Concord and Marin counties raided the Helzer house in Concord, California.
Taylor Helzer fled out the back, and he was apprehended a short time later.
Taylor, Justin, and Dawn Godman were taken into custody. There was no sign of Selena, but there were signs of recent violence.
There was evidence of carpet being pulled up and cleaned. There were bloody outlines in the carpet in the shape of bodies. There was duct tape. There were plastic bags. And what was really kind of pretty unusual for the entire residence was that the hall bathroom was brand new. It had been remodeled, where the rest of the house was in disarray.
Police found Selena's handwritten contact information on Taylor's stationery, and more.
There were documents everywhere, and some of these documents had the names of Ivan and Annette Steinman.
Police quickly determined that Taylor Helzer had once been the Steinmans' financial advisor. The murders in Marin, the disappearance of the Steinmans and Selena Bishop, suddenly they were all connected. Taylor Helzer and the Children of Thunder were placed under arrest. That night, a gruesome discovery was made along the banks of the Sacramento River Delta near Concord, California.
3 duffel bags containing body parts, including a head and part of a torso.
9 bags were pulled from the Delta. They contained the dismembered body parts of Selena Bishop, Ivan Steinman, and Annette Steinman. That brought the total number of victims of Taylor Helzer and the Children of Thunder to 5.
They had mixed up the body parts in the bags to try to throw us off.
The murders made headlines across the country.
What do you think of the charges filed against your sons?
My sons are innocent.
But Taylor had all but admitted his own guilt in a feeble attempt to get Justin and Dawn off the hook. It didn't matter. The DA wanted death penalty verdicts against all three for all 5 murders, and the evidence against them kept growing. One of Taylor's friends, a self-described witch, told police about a safe Dawn Godman had stashed at her home.
Inside, it was basically a Christmas present for the cops.
Police found the gun used to murder Jennifer Villerin and Jim Gamble. The safe also held wallets and driver's licenses of the Steinmans and Selena Bishop.
That directly linked Taylor to all 5 of the victims.
It was then that Dawn Godman's court-appointed attorneys turned to cult deprogrammer Dave Sullivan for help.
Can you just explain the deprogramming process of Dawn Godman?
It took several weeks, and it involved, I had to go through Harmony.
Harmony Impact Training was the self-awareness workshop Taylor had insisted his inner circle go through.
She wouldn't talk to anybody that hadn't gone through Harmony and you know, kind of been reborn.
I do not want to knock empowerment training because I find many people benefit from it. However, in this case, with Taylor Helzer, empowerment training became the devil in this person's head that allowed him to decide that anything was possible, including murder, and it would be okay.
Once Dave Sullivan had deprogrammed Dawn Godman, she had to face the truth. And that meant facing up to what they'd done.
When she realized that Taylor wasn't a prophet, the shock and horror she experienced, because all at once, everything fell. I mean, if he's not a prophet, then what they did wasn't willed by God. So if it wasn't willed by God, it was just something Taylor wanted. If it's just something Taylor wanted, then there was absolutely no reason to murder these people. And then it hits you, oh my God, you know, all these innocent people died. All these families are suffering. I mean, we went straight to a suicide watch on her.
But Dawn Godman didn't choose suicide. Instead, she chose to testify. And the unbelievable story of Taylor Helzer and the Children of Thunder was told in open court. The jury sentenced Taylor Helzer to 5 death sentences for his crimes. Brother Justin received 3 death sentences and 2 terms of life imprisonment. Dawn Godman, in exchange for her testimony, received a sentence of 37 years, 7 months. Taylor Helzer never showed remorse. His belief in himself as a prophet never wavered.
He emphatically argued that he is not a murderer, that yes, he's taken life, but because of the context in which he took it, it wasn't murder. He was actually doing something more akin to what a soldier would do in the battlefield. And collateral damage is sometimes unavoidable. That's his perspective.
It's very strange when you think about this person, Taylor Helzer. There's part of me that believes that he actually thought he was doing something for the good of the world. I think he had to believe that of himself in order to get his followers to believe it. So while it's easy to say that he was a puppet master and that he enjoyed that role, I truly think that he honestly believed he was doing something good for this world.
Taylor and Justin Helzer are currently on death row at California's San Quentin prison. Dawn Godman is currently serving out her sentence at Valley State Prison for Women in Chowchilla, California.